Alpha Fenris crested the ridge at dawn, 7 feet of evolved predator returning from his patrol. Every muscle in his powerful frame was built for one purpose: protecting what was his. The morning mist clung to the valleys of Kepler 442b like a secret, and somewhere in that secret, something was terribly wrong. He could feel it in his bones before his eyes confirmed it. The den, carved into the ancient rootwood where his cubs should have been curled together in sleep, was empty. The bedding was cold. Their scent, barely hours old, led away from safety and toward the forbidden territories. Frost and Storm, his 4-month-old cubs, had vanished in the night. His howl didn't wake the forest, it terrified it into silence. Every creature for miles knew that sound. It was the sound of an apex predator who had just discovered his greatest weakness. 3 valleys away, in a small tent that barely deserved the name, Kai Nakamura stirred slowly. Something was different about this morning. His chest felt heavier than usual, like his wool blanket had bunched up in the night. Getting old, he mumbled to himself, not bothering to open his eyes yet. The weight was warm though, comforting in the crisp morning air. He could hear soft breathing that he attributed to wind through the pines. Kepler mornings were full of strange sounds after 3 years of wandering alone. Beta Sasha arrived first at Fenris's call, her silver fur bristling with concern. She didn't need to ask, the empty den told the story. Her nose went to work immediately, reading the ground like a map. They left after midnight, she reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. They were following something. Not fleeing, walking with purpose. Following what? Fenris's voice was dangerously quiet. In his world, quiet meant violence was moments away. I don't know, Alpha. The scent trail leads toward the contested zone. The contested zone. That strip of wilderness between pack territory and human expansion where no one went. Too dangerous for humans with its rogue predators and toxic flora. Too exposed for pack members who relied on forest cover. It was a death trap for cubs who could barely hunt rabbits. Elder Kai, ancient and scarred from countless seasons, arrived with the rest of the pack. The middle ground calls to young ones seeking something packs cannot provide, he said, his voice carrying the weight of old stories. Folklore, Fenris snarled, but his eyes betrayed doubt. Northern border clear, came the first report from the search teams. River crossing shows no scent, came another. Human paths are empty, reported a third. Each negative report tightened the knot in Fenris's chest. His cubs hadn't just wandered off. They'd chosen to leave and they'd been smart about it. Meanwhile, Kai had finally started his morning routine, though he kept it one-handed. No point disturbing his strangely heavy blanket. The coffee pot gurgled over his small camp stove while he reviewed yesterday's photos on his weather-beaten tablet. 3 years of documenting Kepler's wildlife, and he still found something new every day. A soft snoring came from his chest. Musical, almost purring. Wind's got rhythm today, he said to no one, scratching what he thought was just bunched-up fabric. A tiny purr responded, so soft he thought he'd imagined it. His hand froze for just a moment, then continued. 3 years alone could make you imagine anything. As Fenris's pack converged on the contested zone with deadly precision, Kai finally looked down at his blanket. 2 pairs of amber eyes blinked up at him from small, furred faces, and a tiny voice said, "Morning, warm human." Kai's lifetime of wilderness training was the only thing that kept him from jumping. These weren't Earth animals. These were pack cubs, apex predator offspring that shouldn't exist outside their territory, and definitely shouldn't be sleeping on a human's chest. "Hey there, little ones," he said softly, his voice calm despite his racing heart. "What are you doing here?" Frost, the bolder of the two, stretched like a house cat and yawned, showing tiny fangs that would one day be deadly. "You make lonely sound. Like us." The pieces clicked together in Kai's mind. Last night he'd played his harmonica, an old earth tune his grandfather had taught him. The sound must have carried further than he thought. "We watch you many days," Storm added, the Shire cub pressing closer to Kai's warmth. "You never hunt. Never hurt. Just walk and look and make music." "Your heart drum is slow," Frost explained, pressing a tiny ear to Kai's chest. "Safe slow. Not like pack hearts." Always fast, always ready for fight. They'd been watching him for weeks, following him from ridge to ridge, learning his patterns. The half-eaten supplies he'd blamed on clever animals. The feeling of being watched he'd attributed to paranoia. It had been two lonely cubs seeking something their pack couldn't give them. Pack howls suddenly cut through the morning air, triangulating position. Maybe 10 minutes away, 15 at most. These cubs should be terrified, but they just burrowed deeper into Kai's jacket. "That's your family?" Kai asked. They nodded. "We love Pack," Storm said quietly. "But Pack is loud. Always training. Always fighting. Always proving strong." Kai understood. It was the same reason he'd left human civilization 3 years ago. The constant noise, the endless competition, the need to prove yourself every single day. He'd come to Kepler seeking silence, and apparently so had these cubs. The howls grew closer, more aggressive. Fenris had found the scent trail. Kai made a decision that would change everything. He wrapped the cubs carefully in his coat, not hiding them but protecting them. The pack was hunting, staying still meant death. "Stone Water Place," Frost said quickly. "Pack won't go there. Sacred, forbidden." Kai knew the spot, the hot springs he'd documented last month. The pack considered it taboo for some reason he didn't understand. But taboo meant safety, at least temporarily. He packed quickly, efficiently, 3 years of practice making it automatic. The cubs clung to him as he moved, their small bodies weighing almost nothing. As they walked, he found himself teaching them human walking patterns. Heel to toe, weight distributed, different from the pack's stalking gait. They were naturals at being quiet. The forest grew denser as they moved toward the hot springs. Behind them, Kai could hear the pack spreading out, searching. They moved like a military unit, coordinated and deadly. But they were looking for scared cubs running in panic, not cubs being carried by a human who knew how to move through wilderness without leaving obvious tracks. "Left at Split Rock," Frost whispered. "Through water to break scent." These 4-month-old cubs understood tracking better than most human adults. They were teaching him their pack's hunting patterns even as he carried them away from it. "They expect prey to go high," Storm added. "Go low. Through ravine." They were working as a team. The cubs provided knowledge, Kai provided speed and endurance. It was a partnership that shouldn't exist but somehow felt completely natural. The sound of running water reached them first, then the smell of sulfur from the hot springs. Ancient symbols marked the boundary, carved into trees, painted on rocks. This was old magic, older than the pack, older than human colonization. They crossed the boundary just as the pack surrounded them. Fenris emerged from the forest like a nightmare made real. 7 feet of muscle and fury, his eyes locked on his cubs in the arms of a human. Every instinct in his body screamed to attack, to tear this thief apart. But they were on sacred ground. Violence here meant exile or death, even for an alpha. "You stole them." His voice was thunder. Kai set the cubs down gently. They immediately stood between him and their father, small bodies trembling but determined. "No steal," Frost said, his tiny voice carrying surprising authority. "We chose." The confusion on Fenris's face would have been comical if the situation wasn't so dangerous. His cubs were defending prey. More than that, they were choosing a human over their pack. Kai did something unexpected. He sat down, making himself smaller, non-threatening. His hand rested gently on the cubs' heads, but there was no restraint, no force. Just presence. "I didn't take them," Kai said simply. "They found me. They've been visiting for weeks looking for something. I think they found it." What could a weak human give that the pack cannot? Fenris snarled. "Peace," Storm said quietly. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Elder Koda pushed through the gathered pack, his ancient eyes taking in the scene. His scarred face showed surprise, then something like wonder. "The bridge prophecy," he breathed. Murmurs rippled through the pack. Every cub knew the legend, that one day young ones would choose the quiet path and unite the territories. They'd always thought it meant peace between rival packs, not between species. "They're not stolen," Koda said, approaching slowly. He sniffed Kai, then the cubs, then the bond between them. "They're called." The prophecy speaks of cubs who would choose the heartbeat over the howl. Kai's hand moved to his chest unconsciously. The cubs immediately pressed against him and he could feel what they felt. His steady, slow heartbeat, so different from the rapid pulse of their pack. "What does he give you that I cannot?" Fenris asked, and for the first time, there was pain in his voice instead of anger. Frost looked at his father with wise eyes too old for his age. He gives us quiet, Papa. Time to think. Time to be small. Pack always wants us big, strong, fast. Sometimes we just want to be cubs. Your heart drum is always ready for war, Storm added. His is ready for wonder. Fenris looked at his cubs, really looked at them. They were healthy, well-fed, their eyes bright. But more than that, they were calm in a way he'd never seen. Pack cubs were always anxious, always trying to prove themselves. These two looked happy. Show me, Fenris said finally. Show me what this human teaches. Kai pulled out his harmonica, the small instrument that had started everything. He played a simple melody, something soft and wandering. The cubs immediately relaxed, but surprisingly, so did several young pack members who had crept closer. Then he pulled out his journal, pages filled with sketches of local plants and animals. Not hunting guides but observations. This plant heals. That one hurts. This bird sings before rain. That flower blooms only in moonlight. The cubs demonstrated what they'd learned. Frost showed how to catch fish with patience instead of violence. Storm identified edible plants even adult pack members didn't know about. They showed star patterns Kai had taught them, ways to navigate that didn't rely on scent or instinct. I like the music, one young pack member admitted quietly. Drawing seems peaceful, another added. Parents growled warnings, but Elder Coder raised a paw for silence. Perhaps, he said slowly, our young ones need both paths. Strength from the pack, wisdom from the wanderer. Impossible, Stark, Fenris's brother, snarled. It will make them weak. Will it? Coda asked. Look at these cubs. They tracked through our territory undetected. They found safety we didn't know existed. They learned skills we never thought to teach. Are they weak or are they evolved? The pack was divided. Some saw wisdom in Coda's words. Others, like Stark, saw only contamination of their pure ways. A test then, Stark declared. Let them prove this weakness. A storm approaches, I can smell it. Two groups of cubs. One trained only in pack ways. One trained in both. We'll see who survives better. Fenris looked torn, but the cubs stepped forward confidently. We accept, Frost said. We know both ways now, Storm added. We'll show you they make each other stronger. The next few weeks became legend in the territory. Mornings were spent with the pack, hunting, fighting, learning traditional ways. But afternoons, cubs could choose to visit Kai in the contested zone, which had been declared neutral ground. The transformation was remarkable. Cubs who visited Kai returned calmer but not weaker. They fought with strategy instead of just strength. They tracked using stars and scent. They could find food in places the pack had never thought to look. Frost and Storm became bridges between worlds. They translated pack concepts for Kai and human ideas for the pack. They were equally comfortable stalking prey and sitting still to observe a butterfly. But not everyone was happy. Stark gathered the traditionalists, claiming the human was poisoning their future. The divide grew until the Storm test became not just a challenge but a referendum on the pack's future. The Storm announced itself 3 days early, just as the cubs had learned to read from Kai's weather observations. The traditional group, led by Stark's son, prepared as the pack always had, reinforcing dens, gathering weapons, preparing to fight nature itself. The hybrid group, with Frost and Storm as leaders, took a different approach. They combined Kai's weather reading with pack construction skills. They identified not just strong shelters but one's positioned to avoid flood zones. They prepared not just weapons but food stores. They planned not just to survive but to help others. Sometimes strength is knowing when not to fight, Kai told them as the first winds began to rise. The storm was worse than anyone predicted. Category 5 winds that could strip bark from trees. Rain that fell sideways. Lightning that turned night into terrible day. The traditional group fought bravely. They met nature's fury with fury of their own. But 3 cubs were injured in the first hour. Their reinforced den, built in the traditional spot, flooded when the river changed course. They were strong, but strength alone wasn't enough. The hybrid group read the storm's patterns. They found the eye, that moment of calm, and used it to move to higher ground. When they saw the traditional group's den flooding, they didn't hesitate. Frost led the rescue while Storm guided everyone to the cave system Kai had identified weeks ago. Pack strength carried injured cubs. Human knowledge predicted the storm's path. Together they saved everyone. When the storm passed, the accounting was clear. The traditional group had 3 serious injuries and would have had casualties without rescue. The hybrid group had no injuries and had saved their rivals. Stark stood before the assembled pack, his head low. Strength alone is not enough, he admitted. The Wanderer's wisdom saved our cubs. Fenris stepped forward. From this day the contested zone is renamed the Learning Grounds. Any cub who wishes may learn both ways. And the Wanderer? Someone asked. Kai had been packing, assuming his time was over. But Frost and Storm ran to him, clinging to his legs. You can't go. Storm cried. Who will teach us the quiet ways? Frost added. Fenris approached the human who had changed everything. Will you stay? Not as outsider, but as teacher? Kai looked down at the cubs who had found him when he didn't even know he was lost. They'd given him purpose, family, connection. How could he leave? I'll stay, he said simply. The cubs cheered, and even some adult pack members seemed pleased. But it was the young ones who celebrated most. They would have both paths now, strength and wisdom, Howl and heartbeat. Elder Coda addressed the pack one last time. The prophecy spoke true. These cubs didn't bridge territories between packs. They bridged worlds between species. The quiet path and the strong path are not opposites. They are partners. 1 year later the transformation was complete. The Learning Grounds had permanent structures now, a blend of pack engineering and human design. Kai's simple tent had been replaced by a proper dwelling, though he still preferred sleeping under stars when weather allowed. Frost and Storm, now adolescents, were the first official Wanderer Pack Rangers. They could track like their father, fight like their pack, but also observe like Kai, finding peace in silence. They taught younger cubs both ways, creating a generation that was stronger for its choices. Strategic hunting became Frost's specialty, combining pack tactics with human patience. Storm developed mindful tracking, using meditation to enhance natural senses. Cubs from other territories came to learn, and the message spread. The evening ritual became legendary. As the sun set, the entire mixed community would gather. Kai would play his harmonica while cubs practiced their howls, creating a harmony that shouldn't exist but did. Parents who had been skeptical now brought their newborns to meet Uncle Wanderer, knowing their cubs would grow up with choices their generation never had. Remember when you were small enough to sleep on my chest? Kai asked one evening as Frost and Storm lounged beside him. They were far too big now, nearly adult size. We remember, Frost said, trying to curl up on Kai's chest anyway, his massive frame making it comically impossible. Your heartbeat still means home, Storm added, managing to rest his huge head on Kai's shoulder. And your howls are my favorite music now, Kai replied, scratching behind their ears like he had when they were tiny. Fenris joined them, something that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. The Wanderer who walked alone gave my cubs the world. They gave me family, Kai responded. I thought I was documenting wildlife. Turns out I was waiting for them to find me. The bridge prophecy, Elder Coda said, approaching with his slow, ancient gait. We thought it meant bridging lands. It meant bridging hearts. A messenger arrived from the Eastern Territories, the third one this week. Another pack requesting training in the hybrid method. Frost and Storm immediately volunteered to go teach, and Kai couldn't help but smile. His lonely cubs had become teachers, bridges, healers of old wounds between species. Will you come with us? Storm asked Kai. Where you go I go, Kai replied. That's what family does. As they prepared for the journey, more cubs gathered. Some were pack, some were from human settlements who had heard about the place where children could learn from both worlds. They all wanted to learn the secret. There is no secret, Frost told them. Just listen. To your heartbeat, to your howl, to the silence between them. That's where wisdom lives. The next morning they set out. Kai walking in his steady human way, the cubs flowing between pack stalking and human strides, a group of young ones from multiple species following behind. They were heading to teach another territory, but really they were spreading a revolution. As they crested the ridge, Kai pulled out his harmonica and played the same tune that had drawn two lonely cubs to him all those months ago. But now it wasn't a lonely sound. Frost and Storm howled in harmony, and the young ones joined in, each adding their own voice. Down in the valley, a pack that had never seen a human as anything but threat heard the sound and wondered. Somewhere in that pack, young cubs with eyes too bright and hearts too curious heard something that called to them. What is that sound? One small cub asked her mother. Change, the mother replied, not sure if she should be frightened or hopeful. It sounds nice, the cub said. And in those 3 words was the future. Not conquest or submission, not domination or fear, but something simpler and more powerful. Understanding. The trip to the Eastern Territories took 3 days. Along the way, Kai taught the traveling cubs about reading weather in clouds, finding direction in stars, knowing which insects meant water was near. The pack cubs taught the human settlement children about reading wind patterns, tracking by scent, moving silently through brush. But the real lessons happened at night when they made camp. That's when the questions came. Why did you leave your pack? A young human asked Kai. Same reason Frost and Storm found me, he answered. Sometimes you need quiet to hear your own thoughts. But didn't you get lonely? A pack cub wondered. Every day. Until I learned that being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. And then these two showed up and taught me that family doesn't always look like you expect. Frost and Storm told their story every night and it never got old. The cubs loved hearing about that first morning, when they called Kai warm human, and changed two worlds with their choice. When they finally arrived at the Eastern Territory, they were met with suspicion. Alpha Razor was everything Fenris had been, proud, traditional, certain that pack ways were the only ways. We don't need human weakness, he snarled. Then you don't need human wisdom either, Frost said calmly. We'll go. But Razor's own cubs had other ideas. A tiny female, barely 3 months old, crept forward. Please stay, she whispered. I want to learn the quiet ways. Storm knelt down to her level. What's your name, little one? Echo. Because I repeat everything. But sometimes. She looked at her father nervously. Sometimes I just want to listen. That night, despite Razor's objections, Kai set up camp at the territory's edge. He didn't enter. He didn't push. He just existed, playing his harmonica as the sun set. One by one, cubs snuck out to listen. Then adolescents. Then even some adults. Razor's mate, Silva, was among them. My daughter hasn't slept well since birth, she told Kai. Always anxious, always afraid she's not strong enough. Strength comes in many forms, Kai replied. Sometimes the strongest thing is admitting you need peace. He taught them the simplest thing, how to breathe. Not the rapid ready-for-battle breathing of the pack, but slow, deep breaths that calmed the mind. Echo fell asleep for the first time without crying. Silva made a decision that split the Eastern pack. My cubs will learn both ways. The divide was bitter. Some families chose to learn, others to resist. But cubs have a way of making their own choices. Even cubs from traditional families would sneak away to learn from Kai and his rangers. 6 months later, the Eastern Territory had its own learning grounds. Echo had become the youngest Wanderer Pack Ranger in history, her ability to listen making her the best tracker anyone had ever seen. She could hear a butterfly's wings from 50 feet away, but more importantly, she could choose when to listen and when to rest. The revolution spread like wildfire. Or rather, like a gentle rain that no one notices until everything is green. Southern packs, northern settlements, even the isolated island territories sent representatives. Each place adapted the teachings to their own needs. Desert packs learned patience from human water conservation. Mountain humans learned weather reading from pack altitude experience. But the real change was in the cubs. A generation was growing up that didn't see species as barriers. Pack cubs and human children played together, learned together, grew together. They created new traditions that belonged to neither world and both. The Moonlight Howl became a monthly gathering where everyone, pack, human, and the growing number of mixed families, would gather. Kai would play his harmonica, pack members would howl, humans would sing, and cubs of all species would dance between the sounds. We're not pack anymore, Fenris said one night, watching his territory transformed. And we're not human settlement. We're something new, Kai agreed. Something that doesn't have a name yet. Family, Frost suggested. Community, Storm added. Home, Little Echo said, and everyone agreed that was the best word of all. But the biggest change was in Kai himself. The wanderer who had sought solitude had found the opposite. His small tent had become a sprawling compound where cubs of all species came to learn, play, and find peace. He was never alone now, and he realized he'd never truly wanted to be. He just wanted to be somewhere he belonged. Do you miss the quiet? Frost asked him one evening as dozens of cubs played around them. This is quiet, Kai said, gesturing to the chaos. It's a different kind. The quiet of purpose, of belonging, of knowing you're exactly where you need to be. 3 years had passed since that morning when Kai woke to find 2 cubs on his chest. The cubs were fully grown now, magnificent creatures who could have led their own packs. But they chose to stay, to teach, to bridge. A crisis brought everything to a head. A massive storm system, worse than anything on record, was approaching. Not just one territory but all of them were in its path. Traditional pack methods said to hunker down separately. Human methods said to evacuate to safer ground. But the hybrid method, developed by Frost and Storm, said something different: unite. For the first time in history, all territories worked together. Pack strength built shelters. Human knowledge predicted the storm's path. Cubs who had learned both ways became coordinators, translating between species who had never truly cooperated before. The storm lasted 3 days. Winds that could uproot ancient trees. Rain that turned streams to rivers and rivers to seas. Lightning that made night bright as day. But when it passed, the accounting was miraculous. 0 casualties. Not a single death across all territories. Injuries, yes, but every one treatable because human medical knowledge combined with pack healing herbs. The unity born of crisis didn't fade when the storm did. Boundaries that had existed for generations seemed suddenly meaningless. Why have separate territories when cooperation saved everyone? The Great Assembly was called, the first in recorded history. Every alpha, every human settlement leader, every elder gathered in the learning grounds that had started it all. Razor, who had been the strongest opponent, spoke first. I was wrong. The Wanderer's way doesn't weaken. It strengthens through understanding. Others shared their stories. Cubs who had been failing in traditional training flourishing with combined methods. Human children who had been afraid of the wilderness now navigating it with confidence. Families that shouldn't exist, pack and human together, thriving. But it was Echo, now 7 months old, who said what everyone was thinking. Why do we have to choose? Why can't we just be? And so the territories became the united grounds. Not pack, not human, but something new. Something that had been born the moment 2 lonely cubs decided a wanderer's heartbeat sounded like home. Kai stood before the assembly, the hermit who had become a teacher, the loner who had created a community. I came to this world seeking silence, he said. I found something better. I found the space between silence and sound, between human and pack, between alone and together. That space isn't empty. It's full of possibility. Frost and Storm stood beside him, living proof of that possibility. They were massive now, powerful enough to lead, wise enough to teach, gentle enough to comfort a crying cub of any species. The prophecy was real, Elder Coda announced. But we misunderstood it. It wasn't about bridging territories. It was about bridging hearts. And it started with 2 cubs brave enough to seek warmth in a place no one expected. As the assembly dispersed, cubs ran between the adults, playing games that mixed human tag with pack hunting, laughing in a universal language that needed no translation. That night, in the quiet of his dwelling, Kai sat with Frost and Storm like they had hundreds of times. They were too big to sleep on his chest now, but they still tried, their massive forms draped over him like living blankets. Tell us again, Storm said, though he knew the story by heart. Tell you what? Kai asked, though he knew too. About the morning you found us. You mean the morning you found me? Same thing, Frost yawned. And it was. In finding each other they'd found themselves. In bridging worlds they'd created a new one. In choosing love over law they'd rewritten both. Outside, the United Territories slept peacefully. Cubs of all species dreamed the same dreams. Parents who had once been enemies shared midnight watches. The Wanderer's heartbeat and the pack's howl had become one sound, one rhythm, one family. Your heartbeat, Storm murmured, half asleep. Still home? Kai asked. Always home, both cubs replied. And in that moment, in that place that had no name but home, the future was writing itself. One heartbeat, one howl, one choice at a time. The story of the alpha who found his cubs on a wanderer's chest would be told for generations. But each telling would change, grow, evolve. Because that's what living stories do. They adapt, they bridge, they unite. Just like 2 cubs who chose a different path and changed the world by following their hearts to the quietest, safest place they could find. The chest of a lonely human who didn't know he was waiting for them. Territory no longer meant boundaries. It meant belonging. And everyone, no matter their species, size, or sound, belonged.